Oh, okay, we're live now. This is the first time I've ever done a Google Hangouts live. So I actually don't know what's going on. So I'm just looking at your face the entire time I do the talk, I guess. Share my screen. Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. Can I see the people? Like, yay, hi everybody. Hi. Happy PHP. Yay. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. Oh my goodness, Hangouts is better. Share my screen. And I think Suede, you'll have to like tell me if things are working or not in Slack or something, because this is terrible. Okay. Okay. Can you all see my screen okay? Oh, yes. I'm just going to assume yes. Yay. Okay. I'm going to pull up my slides. I'm going to open up Keynote on my phone. Give me a second, guys. Okay. So I'm just going to start. And because I don't have audio feedback, I don't know if anything terrible is going on. So Suede, you might have to like message me on Slack or something. So hello, everybody. Folks call me Q. I'm the design engineer here at Help Scout, and I created something called Seed CSS. So Seed CSS is a framework that I've created for Help Scout. To give you guys a little bit of background on me, CSS is my thing. It's my specialty, I suppose. It's my jam. But I also have experience as a developer. So I come from a JavaScript Node type background, and also have some experience with Rails and Ruby, and a little bit with PHP. Done some WordPress stuff and also some MVC-ish type stuff with PHP. So like I know what Composer is, and I've heard of Laravel. Hopefully that gives me enough street cred with guys. So yeah, so that's my background. And so I'm going to start off by sharing why I created Seed in the first place. So I created Seed to answer this kind of question, that CSS is hard. And CSS, I believe CSS is hard, mainly comes from the lack of kind of understanding. So CSS is written, I think, typically by two groups of people. One is more like the visual designer folks who like to experiment with animations and making things look really pretty, but maybe they don't have a lot of dev skills. So maybe they're not used to organizing things, making sure files are small, writing things that are scalable, things like that. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the super smart dev people, like guys, I imagine, who are maybe just have been burned by CSS so many times, and you just can't even when it comes to CSS. So anytime there has to be some CSS bug fix, you just can't even bug fix for that one shot that overrides the previous times where you couldn't even and you did some one-time fixes. And that messy kind of CSS code base that nobody understands. And that is why CSS is hard. That I've experienced, I've been experienced with CSS, and solve that from a developer kind of perspective. Because I mean, with JavaScript Node, and that's something I have experience with, code is like, it's so easy to understand. You have all these little modulated files that are kind of single responsibility files. When you want to use them, you require them in. And if you want to install external dependencies, you would do npm install or whatever. Or in PHP's case, Composer install, I think. If I'm wrong, I'm a terrible person, and I'm sorry. So CSS should be easy, right? I mean, the base, there's no logic to it. There's no if else. There's no loops, any of that. Yes, there's logic and pre and post processing CSS, but I'm going to ignore that for now. So base CSS is supposed to be easy. You have a box. You say, hey, box, I want your background to be blue. And now you have a blue box. And easy. So if we're taking a look at the small snippet of CSS here, I'm guessing the sidebar is really important because it's styled on an ID. By the way, never style CSS on an ID. A separate talk. It's really bad. Don't do it. But here we are. So we have a sidebar that's styled with onto an ID. I guess form are not allowed to have margins. And I guess a block lives somewhere. And H4 seem really important because they have some overriding styles here. This is just a small snippet. A file that's 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000 lines long So when you do need to make an update, when there's a bug, it's very, you don't know what's going to happen when you make the change. If you make the change outside, you don't know if it's going to be affecting anything in here, and vice versa. You don't have any confidence, and you don't understand what's going on. And that's really difficult. But you know what? This is the CSS that you guys have to work with. This is the CSS that I have to work with. This is what I like to call welcome to the real world CSS. So if you're starting with like no CSS at all, I mean, everything is great, everything's clean, you're starting with nothing. But oftentimes when we're taking on a CSS project, it's with an application that's been, maybe 6 months old or maybe a couple of years old. So the CSS code base is a little bit messy. And this is real CSS, guys. This is the CSS I have to work with. This is Help Scout's actual CSS. This CSS is live on the website right now. I'm working on refactoring. It's taken a while because there's a lot of CSS to go through, but I'm trying to make it happen. So that's the language itself isn't hard. The execution can be stupidly hard for all the reasons I mentioned. But then also, it's just, even if you had a CSS code base that you wanted to team of multiple people, and all those individuals are working on the same CSS code base, maybe even the same file, how does it handle that? Can it handle multiple people doing things at the same time in multiple PRs that are maybe waiting to be approved at the same time? How bad are the merge conflicts? How intimidating is it to resolve those merge conflicts? Those type of things. So that is why I decided to create CSS, to make CSS less hard. Animation worked. I didn't know you can do animations in Keynote. This is great. This is the first time I'm using Keynote. So my first experience with CSS from a project or application standpoint comes from Bootstrap. And I owe a lot to Bootstrap. I like Bootstrap. Bootstrap is great. They they popularized CSS frameworks, and they kind of think about when you hear the word CSS frameworks. And by using something like Bootstrap as their base. And if you're lucky, you want to customize it, they might have some sort of override or custom file or something where they just dump all the customizations there, and that will live on Bootstrap. Lucky, maybe they'll bring in Bootstrap core into the code base and then tweak and modify Bootstrap as they see fit. And that's bad, because you should never tamper with core code. Because now you're kind of stuck in this weird version of Bootstrap that you made for yourself, and for future Bootstrap updates, you can't update it because you'll have a bunch of merge conflicts, and it's terrible. And overrides are bad. That's how people handle things. Handle things too. I can't remember. We're using like a Bootstrap 2 or something with custom CSS written on top. So when I joined when I joined Help Scout, one of the first things I was tasked with was to figure out how to solve the CSS problem. And I had experience building frameworks for my previous employment, and I know Bootstrap 3's code pretty familiar with that. I know it kind of inside and out. So I was like, okay, great. I'm going to build a custom CSS framework for Help Scout. It's going to be flexible. It's going to be composable. It's going to be better than Bootstrap. I'm going to implement BEM and ITCSS. Those are two CSS architecturing methodologies, block element modifier and inverted triangle CSS, and it's going to be great. I mean, because of that experience, it took me about a week to create. I don't know, Sway, if you remember, but I built it pretty fast, 1 or 2 weeks, and it lived on its own GitHub repo. And when it came time to implement it, I was like, oh yeah, I got to actually use this thing. How am I going to do it? To use seed on the application, the marketing site, and the style guide. And I thought, okay, because it lives in its own private GitHub repo, we can just npm install the required in, and it'll be fine. Tried to add it to the application, to add seed to the application. One very important thing that I overlooked here with this little bit of CSS here. CSS basically makes it sane to code CSS, because we're to say, I want this box to be 200 pixels wide, right? And then you add padding to that box, regardless of how much padding it is, that box will be 200 pixels wide. Without this, if you had a 200 pixel wide box and you added just 10 padding on each side, the box is now 220 pixels wide because of math reasons. So it makes UI very unpredictable to code. Scout's code base, and this day set on the base CSS. So when and Seed, when I coded it at the time, did. So when I implemented Seed, everything was terrible, and I felt terrible, and it was bad. And because I mean, I variabilized everything, like componentized. I used BEM, and I used ITCSS for like the new hotness stuff, and that was great. So I was just like, what have I done? Okay, what if I just kind of copied and pasted files from Seed into the application? But for the marketing side, maybe we can NPM, I don't know. And that's when I realized I just built another Bootstrap that experiences the exact same problems that I experienced with Bootstrap. It's bad. So that's when I started looking at other CSS solutions, and that's when I found Tachyons, and that blew my mind. I guess it's a framework, but it's built on functional CSS, meaning it's lots of little classes that you would use to combine together to create whatever it is you wanted to create. That blew me away. The part that blew me away was all these little modules were on individual GitHub repos, and you can bring them in via npm install. Looked into them right now. They don't do this anymore. I think they stopped sometime last year. This is just one giant repo now, which is a little sad, but you can still do this today with a modular version of Tachyons. What I like about Tachyons, using of Tachyon. So if I wanted to create a button with Tachyons, I'd have to combine these 8 or 9 classes together to create a single button. You're doing the whole, I'm going to write CSS and JavaScript thing like all the React peoples are doing, which is really cool. But Help Scout, we can't do that. And I'm sure other applications that are maybe PHP or Rails based, they can't do that either. You got to write it in the markup. And it doesn't make sense to have to this 9-class button every single time you want to create a button. So I knew I liked the component aspect of Bootstrap, where a button is you just provide a class and there you have a button. It's great. It works. And I like the modularization of Tachyons. So with some experimentation, Seed v2 for us to use today. It's all open source. Because the first version wasn't good enough. So to give you guys a demo of how Seed works, say I want to I like Bootstrap. I like them only for their buttons. I just want to use a button from Bootstrap. So we're going to npm install Bootstrap 4 into our code base. Bootstrap 4 is still in alpha, but it's pretty stable and we can kind of use it. And after you npm install it, and typically if you want to use a CSS module or library, you have to npm install it, which gets added to your package.json. And then you have to rig it up or hook it up with your Node Sass compiler somehow, whether that's Grunt, Gulp, Webpack, or whatever. Library kind of has their own way to do it. So assuming we've done that, and now we just say, okay, I want to use the button from Bootstrap in our main.scss or application CSS file. Well, this actually doesn't work because Bootstrap has a bunch of dependencies for the Sass to compile. If you don't include these things, the Sass doesn't compile, terminal yells at you, and you feel bad. The only way I knew that Bootstrap button required these things was I had to look at the source code and kind of work my way backwards to figure out, oh yeah, it needs this mix-in, or it needs this other mix-in, and all that kind of stuff. This kind of like manual rigging of things, of dependencies, is something I really, really didn't like, and something I wanted to avoid in creating Seed. If we were to do it the Seed way, we can do npm install seed button, which is just the Seed. We call them seed packs. The name was clever. So we have the seed button pack, and we do the same Node Sass rigging thing. And to add the seed button into our code base, we just do import seed button, and that's all you need to do, which is great. So seed button does have dependencies, like Bootstrap's button does, but I'll get into that in a moment. So I don't know if you guys remember the whole box sizing thing. But so seed pack kind of stuff built into the class. And the idea was, if you were to npm install any kind of seed pack, any kind of seed component, button, input, or whatever, it will work out of the box. Any dependencies that it manages by itself, do not have to think about that stuff. And that's how I wanted it to work. So we take a look at Bootstrap dependencies. It's handled via Bootstrap's main bootstrap.scss file. It does all these various imports, and order really matters. This is order really matters with how Bootstrap handles it. In contrast to this, if we take a look at dependencies, it's handled in the package.json file, and Node takes care of all this stuff for us. And we can see that there's about 5. The seed button requires a specific version of those packs. So version management and version dependency is a thing with seed. So I'm going to talk about one of these packs, seed control. All it is 2 variables. The main one is seed control sizes. And seed control sizes is basically an object or hash of key value pairs and the sizes of the buttons that we have. So with Bootstrap, you have small, medium, large. I think they dropped extra small for Bootstrap 4. With seed button, we can have the same thing. But then you might be thinking, well, why did you have this in an external pack? Why didn't you just put this seed button? Well, the benefit of having seed control in its own individual pack is that similar UI components to buttons, like inputs, like drop-downs, and so on, using seed control. And then we have seed control is at the seed button. Some inputs. I want to create some inputs. I have input, and seed control is then being used in seed input. So seed input doesn't rely on seed button and vice versa. They're all the self-contained individual things. Share the same variables, which is important because sometimes you want to have a button next to an input, and sometimes in certain UIs you want both of them to be small. The variables provided by control allow you to do that. Similar usage of seed. I want to add an extra size. So we have small, medium, large from the config seed call. I want to add extra small to the object. Well, you can do that by writing your own CSS file that overrides the default variables of seed control. Again, don't touch core. Touching core is bad. So you write variables that override default variables. Seed control. Think of it as extending. I don't know the PHP equivalent of that, but yeah. So you do that, and seed control is like, all right, updates. Okay, I know what to do with it. I'm going to send it to these guys. So now, if you had, instead of the default small, medium, large sizes, if you told seed control, hey, I want extra small, medium, large, seed control button and seed input would automatically generate those sizes for you by looping through the hash that you provided. That's right. It loops through the variables to intelligently generate the sizes you want. A lot of flexibility because maybe you only want 2 sizes, or maybe you want 12 sizes. As long as hash correct in the hash in your configuration, then seed button and seed input and anything that relies on seed control knows what to do with it. So now we have really interesting. Now we have seed packs that rely on other seed packs, the dependencies. I know, right? Yo, dog, I heard you like dependencies. A little bit different because all seed control will variables, and variables don't get compiled to CSS. Actual selectors like class and IDs and all those guys, they get compiled to CSS. So I had a pack that depended on another pack, and both of those guys. A good example would be dropdown. And seed dropdown is modeled after Bootstrap's dropdown, where you have a button as a trigger, and then you have some sort of thing that displays the menu. So in my particular project, if I have both seed button and seed dropdown, well, seed dropdown has seed button as a dependency. So now I have 2 sets of buttons that could potentially get compiled into the CSS, and that's bad. Now I have duplicate CSS for no reason. Get dependencies, at least from a. So this, I actually worked on this for maybe about 3 to 4 months. This took me a long time. I tried anything you can think of, and eventually I had one solution, and that's the solution I've implemented into all the packs, and that's what we use today. This one special pack called Seed Publish that automatically handles this for you. So for whatever reason, have a setup where button is 10 times. It will only compile CSS. It works magically, and it's great. If we take a look at Seed Publish's actual GitHub page, this is a screenshot of it. All the seed packs basically has the same kind of formula. You have the title, you have some sort of instructions on how to install it. Most of them have a link to documentation. I'm working on documentation. There's a lot to document. I'm trying my best. I'm only one person. But the one, this green button here, status button for Travis, because with Seed, testing is a thing, and that's great. I mean, you know what's. Let's just look at it. So for Seed Publish, where I've written a bunch of tests to make sure it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And this is great because on Seed Publish for it to do its thing. How mysteriously broken, everything would be broken and everything would be bad. I mean, I know tests can't be foolproof, but I mean, this is way better than having tests at all. It's something I really, really like from the dev world, because with CSS, testing is not a thing. Who writes tests for CSS? You just look at it in the browser. If it looks fine, it's fine. Testing a thing with CSS, and this is a really, really great start. And this leverages a test library called Sass True, which allows you to actually write tests in CSS, or Sass rather, and is powered by Mocha, which is the actual test runner. It doesn't the way I actually like it to work, so I actually had to tweak it a little bit with another seed pack that I have, but it's great. So you have this whole insert thing, and then you have some output, and you have some expectations of what that output should be. Every single seed pack that I've released, tested, and at bare minimum, the bare minimum test is, does this thing compile to Sass properly? If it can't, due to Sass errors or anything, it will fail the test. So you have some confidence that if you were to import button seed, input whatever, you know that it's going to work. And for more complicated things like Seed Publish, where you have fancy mix-ins or fancy functions and things, those are tested as well. Guys, having tests makes me so much more confident in doing things. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. How am I doing so far? I have no feedback in this entire time, so I don't know if things are broken. Okay, cool. Oh, my mouse is so laggy. I'm going to open Index. So this live coding session, I'm just going to show you guys how you can add Seed to your project. Very bare bones index.html. There's nothing here. Actual CSS, there's nothing in here. Oh, there's nothing here. There's only a little bit of things to kind of style the background color and so on. But I've prepped it, the appropriate seed classes to the inputs into the buttons. What else? So hopefully this font is large enough. So I want to implement Seed's input and button styles in my project. I don't want anything else. I just want the input and buttons. Great. So to add seed packs to your project, you would do npm install, save as a dependency, seed button and seed input. Will magically fetch it from the internet and add it to your computer. Oh boy. Taking a while. It shouldn't take a while. All right, it's fine. So now that's step one. Internet to your computer. Rig it up with Node.js somehow. So it would be under script, things like gulp and Grunt and all those guys, they have that helps make this easier. I'm just going to go bare bones screen. Oh, really? Oh, shoot. I'm just going to... okay. Can you see it now? I'm guessing yes. This live coding session is going great so far. Yay. Okay, so just to show you guys what I did. npm install seed button and seed input, fetching it from the internet, downloading it onto my computer, double thumbs up. Hopefully it works. Great. So the next thing I got to do is rig it with Node Sass. And like I mentioned before, you can do this with Gulp, Grunt, or whatever. For this one, I'm just going to do straight Node Sass. And how it works is they have this fancy include paths your paths into. And I'm going to pass it via this array. You do require, and then you pass in the package name that you want to require. So I'm going to do seed input and seed button. So you would think that this would work, but Node Sass is funny, guys. Appreciate about it, but it's just what it is. So if I were to run this now, you can see that I have a bunch of paths, but these paths are actually nested arrays. Node Sass, a flattened array. Okay, I got to somehow prep these guys to be a flat array. And this problem isn't isolated to C. This is just how it is when you want to add Sass modules into Node Sass. You have to provide it with a flattened array. So I've created a little Node module called Sass Pathfinder. So I'm just going to install that, Sass Pathfinder. And all it does is that it basically, you give it a series of nested arrays, and then it flattens that array, and it also deduplicates it. I mean, you can write your own CSS or JavaScript code to do that. I just want to depend on a library because it's easier, and I'm lazy. So we're going to define it, Pathfinder, Sass Pathfinder. Now, instead of passing an array, we're going to pass whatever it is that returns. And within Pathfinder, I'm going to pass in the array of seed paths. So if I do, again, let's check out the array. Great, it's one array. Things have been deduped, and no more nesting arrays. Great. So now Node Sass knows how to understand this. Great. Step 2, we're done. Step 2, setting things up with Node Sass. Adding it into our actual CSS code. CSS, it could be application.css or whatever it is you have. So we're going to import pack seed button index. Just to input. The standard, how you do it in Sass, how you import libraries and other files. And this little convention here, pack / whatever name _ index, that's a convention I came up with. I like it because it helps let you know that these are external things. Hopefully you don't have a folder called pack in your application. But for the most part, for most people, it's really helpful because you know that, oh yeah, this is coming from a seed pack, this is the name of the seed pack, and then this _ index is basically importing everything from that seed pack. So for example, if I just wanted the configuration file from seed button, I can just do that. Let's import the config. But no, I want the entire button. If I run npm start, hopefully this works. Great. Console's not yelling at me. Yay! I have styled inputs and styled buttons. Other things from the internet. We set it up with Node Sass, and we added it to our CSS project. Great. But there's one thing you might notice. So you notice how the button's text is like this default browser serif thing. Intentionally built Seed's components to be, it's kind of modeled after React's components, where they're dumb. they're only responsible for styling whatever it is that they're meant to do. So this button is styled to look like a button. It has like various states. All that stuff is handled. Typography is interesting. I feel like typography should be handled at the or body level for like the font size or the font family to be defined. So the button and these inputs shouldn't be responsible for that. They do. So okay, all right, fine. To style the default text a little bit, and we want to implement the thing that I mentioned earlier. People typically do that now with like normalize.css, or with Bootstrap they have something called reboot. Seed has one too. It's called, I'm just going to shrink this a little bit. Seed, oops, npm install seed reset. And that is the reset pack for seed. So step 1, install from the internet. Step 2, add it to. What's interesting here is because remember, every single seed pack is self-contained. So order doesn't actually matter. However it is you want, and the code should work as you expect. Step 3, adding it to main. All right. npm start to build the code. Yay, code built. Let's check the browser. Yay, things don't look terribly fugly anymore. Text is not serif. Typical flow we have for seed packs, or for any kind of CSS thing, rather. You install it from the internet, add it to Node.js, your SaaS project. After a while, I found this to be a little bit laborious, especially if there's a lot of seed packs I want to use, and there are a lot of seed pack guys. Just one thing, this special seed pack called Harvester. I gave it a clever name. I like trying to give things clever names because it's fun. And what this does is that it automatically finds all the seed packs defined in your package JSON, and it imports that into Node for you. So we do import install save dev seed harvester. Okay, I'm gonna skip one part of my talk, but that's fine. That's fine. This part's important. Live coding stuff. So instead of SAS Pathfinder, I'm going to change this to seed. Harvester. I don't need to add these guys in here. It knows how to find this for us. So if I do another npm start, yay, no complaints, and everything looks fine. Seed Harvester actually has another bonus, is that you can actually pass into here if you want to. So if you do Bootstrap, Bootstrap SAS or whatever it is, I believe Bootstrap SAS is a thing, and it will know how to flatten and for you. But you don't have to, the best part about this is that you don't have to pass it seed paths. It just knows how to find it. So great. I have it in Node and set up with Node. What about the other part where I have to into CSS? That's where my other pack comes into play. I call it seed packer. Same way, npm install seed packer. And this takes care of the CSS side of things. And what's interesting about these two packs is that Seed Harvester doesn't rely on Seed Packer and vice versa. These guys, you can use them totally independently, but it's magical when you combine them. And all you got to do and initialize it. Great. That's all you got to do from the CSS, from the JavaScript side. Jumping to the CSS side, we no longer need these. All we need, provided in the documentation, is a single seed packs file. Seed packs. I mean, you can put stuff in here, but seed packer will override that. So you have this blank seed packs file. Now, all you got to do is import that file into your project, seed packs. I do another build. No terminal yelling, that's great. And the styles are the same. Cool. So now what if I wanted to install a bunch of seed packs because seed is really cool? So now you can do npm install save seed opacity, modify opacity, seed grid, because grids are cool. There's a bunch of stuff. Seed table, seed display. The internet, that was step 1. Now step 2 and 3 are handled for us via packer and harvester. So nothing has changed here, nothing has changed here. But if we take a look at seed packs, right, but oh, I gotta run it. Yeah, so if I take a look at seed packs, it's automatically added in the import paths for us. And again, order doesn't matter with seed packs because they're all self-contained. So now the flow is really great. You have all this stuff kind of automated. So forward, if you wanted to just add seed packs, you just do npm install seed pack save, and you got it. Flow I have set up for the Help Scout application, the marketing site, the style guide, and each of my personal projects. And it's great. It's wonderful. So that was my live coding part. I'm going to stop screen sharing. How am I doing, guys? Okay. How much time do I have? Eight minutes? Okay. So very quickly, I'm going to share some final thoughts with you guys. Let me see. I can do demos afterward. Yeah, this is port. I'm going to share it. I'm going to share it. I'm going to skip over a bunch of slides. Give me a second. On how you can improve your CSS today, even if you don't use seed. So these tips are things that I kind of figured out and partially invented when I created seed, how seed works. So I'm going to share some of these things with you guys, and again, you don't need to use any bit of seed. So the biggest, most important tip is to split your CSS into smaller files. You do this with JavaScript, you do this with PHP, you do this with Ruby, you do this with CSS. It doesn't make any sense. Splitting into smaller files makes code easier to understand, especially when it comes to PRs and stuff where you have to check over what everyone is doing. So for example, if we have main and then we have some account settings CSS that takes care of any and everything that has to do with account settings styles. It goes to about 2,000 lines long, and that's very daunting to work with. So what you can do is actually split that single file into a directory, and that directory split you had into various sections or components or whatever it is you had. So now account settings becomes a directory, and under account settings you have account, notifications, security, or whatever your application has. And you have a main index file that imports all of them, that handles the imports for all of them. And your main.css will import that index file, similar to how you would import and add seed things. Account settings index, you can see that you can see this S account settings class. S is a ITCSS convention. It stands for section or scope. And that the imports actually happen inside of the class. This is something I discovered pretty late in name, and it changed my world, because by doing this, scoping becomes a thing. Any code that you've imported within S account settings, and that's great for control and for understanding what code is, where it's coming from, and what it's doing. Actual file, this account file under account settings, we can take scoping another step further in creating variables, these dangerously generic look variables inside of S account. And again, these variables don't leak out. And this is really great if you want to use variables for like a one-time thing. You don't add it to your global variables file. You just have it scoped inside of this class. So now you can add font size of whatever this random number is that the designer gave you because of reasons. Take a look at the actual compiled CSS. The class names follow the same structure as your file setup. So that makes things easier to find, easier to debug, and easier to understand. So let's pretend for web security, I pulled my headphone cord out. Oh, wires. So let's pretend that security over time gets really big. Same thing, you can split security into small files, turn security into a directory, and have the same pattern. And theoretically, this can scale indefinitely. You can break files apart as many times as you want. And maybe one day you realize, all right, there's way too many files, and 3 of them are named modal. Well, at this point, if you want to refactor, it's really easy. Because now you can move files around, build files, or combine files. You don't have to peck and hunt and try to consolidate chunks of code together. So that makes things really easy, and that's been really, really helpful for us to try to refactor the code base that is Help Scout CSS. Once you have those modules, it's really helpful to move those modules into GitHub repos. You don't have to have public modules. You can have them as private repos. And really great because now this into different projects like app or a marketing site or a style guide or whatever. And that's what we've done with all the seed repos. So I'm going to skip over a bunch of slides because I know I'm running out of time. And I'm just going to jump through this one where I'm like, thank you, guys. So hopefully that was interesting and helpful. People moving. Thank you, yay. Do we have time for Q&A? Sorry, no audio. That's fine. Do we want to do Q&A or you guys want to go on with your birthday celebration? Yes. This is all documented. Single seed pack I've created has documentation, bare minimum documentation to get it working. If you check out, I think there's a link to the seed site. The packs that have more documentation, you'll be able to find them there. Yeah, so there's bare minimum documentation. I'm working on it, guys. I'm only one person. Okay, holding on. What you giggling about? What's so funny? You're typing or not. Oh, I saw your hand do some explosion movement. Oh, you're showing CSS. Okay, cool. And things happen. Okay, thanks everybody. Hope you guys have a wonderful Upstate Page Fate birthday celebration. Thanks, Wade, for inviting me. Have yourself a fantastic evening. This was fun.